I thought working on Beyoncé's tour would be the experience of a lifetime, but what I discovered shattered everything I believed about fame. There's something unnatural behind her ageless beauty, and I saw it firsthand. What if I told you the Beyoncé you know isn't entirely her? What if there's a dark secret keeping her young? And it's far worse than anyone could imagine. When I first started working on Beyoncé's tour, I couldn't believe my luck. I was behind the scenes, getting a glimpse into the life of one of the most famous people in the world. At first, everything seemed exactly how you'd expect: glamorous, perfect, and unreal. Beyoncé was flawless. Everyone around her, from the crew to the fans, seemed entranced by her presence. She didn't just look young, she looked ageless. It wasn't just her looks, her energy was otherworldly. She seemed tireless, even after performing for hours under the hot stage lights. Most of us were drained just from the rehearsals, but Beyoncé, she was always at her peak, always vibrant, always glowing. At first, I thought it was just her dedication, her intense focus on her craft. But then, the weird little things started to pile up. I'd be backstage, watching her interact with the crew, and it was like time didn't affect her. No matter how many days passed, no matter how exhausted she appeared, she never showed signs of age, stress, or fatigue. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Crew members started whispering, not openly, but in hushed tones, about how she seemed too perfect, like there was something unnatural about her. For a while, I dismissed it as just another celebrity rumor. I mean, who doesn't hear gossip on a big tour like this? But then, one night, it hit me. I had stayed behind after a show to grab some equipment, and there she was, alone in her dressing room. Normally, after a performance, she would be surrounded by people. But on this night, the room was silent, save for her soft breathing. I watched her for a moment, just taking in the surreal sight of her. And that's when I realized it. She hadn't aged a day. Not a single day. It wasn't just that her skin looked perfect or that her movements were fluid and youthful. It was deeper. Something more disturbing, more unnatural. She looked exactly the same as she had when I first saw her, and I had been working for weeks. I tried to tell myself it was just a fluke, a trick of the light, maybe, but I knew it wasn't. I brushed the thought away. Maybe I was overthinking things, or maybe I was just tired, but the feeling of unease stayed with me. It gnawed at the back of my mind. Something about her, about the way she never seemed to age, didn't sit right. One evening during a rehearsal, it all became even more unsettling. I was close enough to hear the whispers of some of the crew. They were talking about how Beyoncé seemed to be different behind closed doors, how sometimes, after a show, she'd go silent for hours, almost like she was in a trance. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion. But as I listened more closely, I realized it wasn't just physical fatigue they were talking about. It was something else, something mental, even spiritual. That night, I got my first real taste of what everyone was whispering about. After the show ended, the crew went out to grab some food. I stayed behind to finish a few things, and I found myself wandering into a hallway I wasn't supposed to be in. It led to a part of the arena that was closed off from the public, a hallway that seemed to go on forever, dimly lit with flickering lights. I had no reason to be there, but something I can't quite explain, compelled me to walk further in. And that's when I saw her. Beyoncé was standing in front of a mirror in a small, dark room. She was staring at herself with an intensity that made the air feel thick. She didn't move. Her expression was blank, almost empty. I felt a chill run down my spine. Her gaze seemed vacant, like her soul wasn't there. It was like staring at a shell of a person, an empty vessel. I couldn't move. I stood frozen, watching, terrified that she might turn and catch me watching. But she didn't. She just kept staring as if she didn't know I was there. Then something strange happened. The light in the room shifted. The mirror, which had always reflected Beyoncé perfectly before, seemed to warp. The edges of her reflection, her image, began to ripple, like water disturbed by a sudden movement. Her face blurred for a second, and in that blur, I saw something, someone else. It was brief, just a flash, but it was enough to freeze me in place. A shadow, a presence, something other than Beyoncé. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run, to turn away, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding in front of me. And just as quickly as it started, it stopped. The reflection returned to normal, and Beyoncé blinked as though nothing had happened. She seemed to come back to herself, her gaze softening as she turned away from the mirror and walked out of the room. I didn't know what I had just witnessed, but I felt it deep in my gut. Something was wrong. Something wasn't right. What I didn't realize was that this moment was just the beginning. What I saw that night was nothing compared to what I would uncover next. And that's when the truth would start to unravel, piece by piece, revealing a secret that no one was supposed to know. The night after I saw Beyoncé in that strange trance-like state, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My mind kept returning to the way she looked in front of the mirror, empty, distant, like she wasn't really there. The feeling of unease only grew as the days passed. I tried to brush it off, but the image of her vacant eyes haunted me. I didn't want to believe what I was starting to suspect. I began paying closer attention to her interactions with the crew. It was easy to tell that everyone was in awe of her, but I started to see signs of something darker lurking beneath the surface. Crew members would speak in hushed voices when they thought no one was listening. And when they did speak about her, it wasn't always with admiration. There was fear in their words, and the more I listened, the more I understood why. One night while we were working late after a show, I overheard two crew members whispering. They were talking about Beyoncé's private moments. They spoke about how sometimes after a show, she would disappear for hours, only to return with this eerie calmness about her. There was always something off about it, like she was in a deep trance, as if she wasn't fully present in her own body. The words trance stuck in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something similar. What if Beyoncé wasn't just working hard to maintain her image? What if there was something else that was making her so perfect, so unearthly? The next night, I decided to follow my instincts. I stayed behind after the show and waited. I told myself I was just looking for some time to clear my head, but deep down, I knew I was searching for answers. There was a part of me that was afraid of what I might find, but another part was desperate to know the truth. I'd always been a bit of a night owl, but this was different. This night, the arena felt like a ghost town. The echo of distant voices and the lingering sound of the crew packing up made the place feel empty and abandoned. It was a strange sensation. As I wandered down a corridor that led to the backstage areas, I noticed a door that was barely ajar. It was one of those doors that was always locked, always off limits to everyone except her. I'd seen it before, but I'd never dared go near it. But tonight, I couldn't help myself. I needed to know what was behind it. Something told me this was where the answers lay. My heart raced as I pushed the door open. It creaked on its hinges, a sound that echoed down the empty hallway. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with shadows stretching long across the walls. There, standing alone in the center, was Beyoncé. She was facing the mirror again, her posture straight, her movements slow and deliberate. I wasn't sure if I should step inside. The air in the room was thick, almost heavy. It felt like the walls were closing in around me, but something pushed me forward. Something I couldn't explain. I stepped inside quietly, my breath shallow, as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Beyoncé stood motionless in front of the mirror, and for the first time since I'd met her, I felt a deep sense of unease. Her face was expressionless, as though she was no longer herself. Her eyes were wide open, but they weren't looking at the mirror. They weren't looking at anything. It was like she wasn't even aware of what was happening around her. I watched, frozen in place, as she began to mutter something under her breath. It wasn't English. It was a language I didn't recognize. The words were soft, but felt powerful, like they were carrying some kind of hidden meaning. I had no idea what she was saying, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't normal. Then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. Beyoncé blinked and shook her head as if snapping out of a trance. Her face softened, and the blank, vacant look in her eyes disappeared. She turned and walked away from the mirror, acting as though nothing had happened. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. What had I just witnessed? I wanted to run, to get out of there, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The fear began to set in. Something was happening to Beyoncé, something beyond the limits of what I could comprehend. This wasn't just about an image or beauty secrets anymore. There was something much darker at play. As I left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just witnessed something I wasn't meant to see. And the worst part, I didn't know if I could ever unsee it. And when I dug deeper, what I uncovered would change everything I thought I knew about Beyoncé and about reality itself. One night, after a late rehearsal, I was working in the backstage area packing up some equipment. The arena was quiet and the crew was scattered, most of them heading out for some rest before the next show. That's when I noticed Beyoncé standing off to the side, talking to someone who wasn't there. It was like she was having a conversation, but there was no one else in the room. I stopped in my tracks, confused. She was speaking in low tones, her voice soft but urgent. I couldn't hear exactly what she was saying, but I could see her face. Her expression wasn't the one I was used to, the one of controlled professionalism. Instead, her face was empty. Her eyes were wide, distant, like she was looking straight through me and into something far beyond. But what shocked me the most was that the conversation wasn't in English. The words were strange, unfamiliar, almost ancient. It sounded like a language I didn't recognize, some kind of chanting or incantation. I had no idea what it was, but the moment I heard it, I felt a deep unease crawl up my spine. I had to know more. I stepped closer, making sure I wasn't seen. But the closer I got, the more intense the feeling became. I wasn't just eavesdropping on a private conversation. I was witnessing something far darker. It felt like I had stumbled into a forbidden world, a world where rules didn't apply and the normal laws of nature didn't hold sway. Just as I was about to get closer, Beyoncé's head snapped up, and for a moment, her eyes locked onto mine. I froze. There was something in her gaze, a kind of coldness, a knowing look that sent a chill through me. She didn't say a word, but I knew she had sensed me. Without saying anything, she turned away and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to follow her, to demand answers, but my body felt like it was made of stone. I couldn't move. The air in the room was thick, oppressive, and the tension was almost unbearable. I didn't know what to think. Was I losing my mind? Was this all in my head? Or was there something truly wrong with Beyoncé? Something I wasn't supposed to understand? As the days went on, I noticed more strange behavior. It wasn't just the conversations with no one else in the room. It was the way she would sometimes look at crew members like she wasn't seeing them at all. She would smile, but it was an empty smile, as though she was going through the motions, doing what was expected of her but not really present. It was like she was disconnected, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. I was starting to wonder if the woman I'd seen on stage, the woman who seemed so full of life and energy, was actually someone else entirely. What if she wasn't controlling her own body? What if there was something else in her, something that was using her as a vessel? Then, one day, I stumbled upon something that confirmed my worst fears. I was looking for some paperwork in a back storage area when I found a file that had been carelessly shoved behind a stack of boxes. The file wasn't labeled, and I don't even know why I decided to open it. But as I flipped through the pages, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a series of documents that mentioned rituals. There were notes on symbols, incantations, and old texts. The more I read, the more I realized that these weren't just random pages. They were instructions for something to keep someone powerful, ageless, and in control. And from the language used in the documents, it was clear. This wasn't something I could explain with science or logic. This was about controlling energy, bending time, and using some dark force to maintain youth and power. The name Beyoncé was mentioned several times in the documents, but not in the way you'd expect. It was like the documents were written about her as an object, as a vessel for something much older and more powerful. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My mind screamed for me to stop, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. What I had just discovered wasn't just some conspiracy theory. It was real. Beyoncé was not who she appeared to be. She was part of something far bigger. And whatever it wasn't meant for ordinary people to understand. I felt a sense of impending doom as I sat there, realizing that I had uncovered something so dangerous it could ruin everything. And if Beyoncé, or whatever was inside her, found out that I knew, there was no telling what it would do to me. But the worst part, that wasn't even the most terrifying thing I would discover. As I kept digging, the truth became even darker, and the danger grew more real. What I had uncovered was just the beginning. And the deeper I went, the more I realized I wasn't just a bystander. I was becoming part of something far worse than I ever imagined. The night I found the file was the night everything changed. I thought I could run away from the truth, but the truth had already found me. The fear that had been gnawing at me for days, maybe even weeks, grew into something that threatened to swallow me whole. I couldn't just walk away now. The more I uncovered, the more I realized there was no turning back. I had seen too much, and what I was dealing with was far beyond anything I was prepared for. That night, as the crew left for the evening, I knew I had to go back to the room. The one I shouldn't have been in. The one I had seen Beyoncé in that trance, staring at the mirror. It was like a magnetic pull, like the room was calling me back, begging me to discover its secrets. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't ready, but the deeper I got, the more I felt like I didn't have a choice. I needed answers. I slipped through the hallways, heart pounding in my chest. My breath was shallow, and every creak of the building felt like a warning, telling me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to know what was behind that door. I had to know who or what was really in control of Beyoncé. When I reached the door again, I felt the same chill I had felt before. But this time, it was stronger. The air was thick with tension, as though something ancient, something otherworldly, was waiting just beyond it. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking like an old coffin being disturbed after centuries of slumber. The room was exactly how I remembered it, dimly lit, the shadows stretching long against the walls. But this time, I wasn't standing in the doorway, frozen in place. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't a bad smell, but it was unnatural. There was an overpowering scent of incense, but it wasn't like anything I'd ever smelled before. It was thick, heavy, and clung to the air like a fog. The room felt charged with energy, something old, ancient, and dangerous. Then I saw it. The mirror. The same one I had seen Beyoncé staring into. But now, something was different. The air around it shimmered, almost like it was alive. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I felt drawn to it, like there was something hidden behind the glass, something that wanted to show me the truth. I stepped closer, cautiously, as if the mirror itself might attack me. But I had to see it. I had to understand. And that's when I saw it, the mark. On the wall behind the mirror, etched into the wood, was a series of strange symbols. They were carved with precision, like someone had painstakingly made them over centuries. The symbols were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Old, almost prehistoric, and yet alive. There was a pulsating energy around them, like they were calling to something. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and traced one of the symbols. It felt wrong. A sudden sharp pain shot through my hand, like an electric shock. I yanked my hand back, but the pain didn't stop. It lingered, like the symbol had somehow embedded itself into my skin. The mirror before me began to distort, its surface rippling as if it were made of liquid. I backed away, heart racing. My mind screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. I had come this far. I had to know what was happening. Suddenly, I heard a noise, footsteps. I spun around, but there was no one there. The door was still closed, and the hall beyond was empty. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Something was in the room with me. Then, out of nowhere, Beyoncé appeared. She didn't walk in. She appeared. One moment, the room was empty, and the next, she was standing in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection with that same vacant look in her eyes. She didn't seem to notice me. She was somewhere else. Like her body was here, but her mind was somewhere far, far away. She raised her hand to the mirror, tracing the same symbols I had just seen. As her fingers made contact with the glass, the room seemed to shift. The air thickened, the shadows deepened, and the mirror began to glow with an eerie, unnatural light. I couldn't breathe. It was like the room was alive, pulsating with a strange, otherworldly energy. The symbols on the wall began to glow, and I felt the temperature drop sharply. Then, it happened. The reflection in the mirror shifted. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but no. The reflection wasn't hers anymore. It wasn't Beyoncé's face staring back at her. It was something else. Something ancient. Something dark. A face that wasn't human, but something much older. It had sharp, angular features. Dark eyes that seemed to pierce into my soul. I stepped back, my heart racing in my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It felt like the very air was thick with terror, and I was trapped in its grip. The reflection in the mirror smiled, and when it smiled, it wasn't Beyoncé's smile. It was something far more sinister. That's when I understood. Beyoncé wasn't just a vessel for this thing. She was being controlled. The ritual I had stumbled upon wasn't about keeping her young. It was about something much darker. It was about soul possession. This entity had found its perfect vessel in Beyoncé, using her as a conduit to stay alive, to stay in control. I wanted to run. I needed to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, staring at the reflection of this creature, knowing that I had uncovered something I wasn't supposed to. And then the worst thing happened. The reflection spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The moment those words echoed through the room, I knew I was trapped. I had uncovered something that was never meant to be seen. And worse, I was now part of something far darker than I ever could have imagined. The words echoed in my mind long after they left the reflection's mouth. "You shouldn't have come here." It wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. I could feel it in the air, a chilling pressure that seemed to close in around me. The room felt smaller, the shadows deeper, and the very air seemed to thicken with an unnatural force. For a moment, everything stopped. Beyoncé's reflection in the mirror still smiled, but it wasn't her. It was something else, something ancient, malevolent. I could feel its eyes on me even though it wasn't looking directly at me. It was like it knew I was there, like it could see into the very core of me, into the secrets I was hiding from myself. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my body paralyzed with fear. It felt like the room was closing in on me, like the walls were coming together, and I was trapped in this nightmare with no way out. Then, without warning, Beyoncé turned around. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, I saw her, the real Beyoncé, the woman I had seen on stage, the confident, brilliant performer who had captivated millions. But that was only for a moment. It was like her true self was briefly emerging from behind the mask, only to be swallowed again by the thing that was controlling her. She blinked, her gaze softening, and then she smiled, but it wasn't the smile I had seen before. The one that lit up the room, the one that had won the hearts of millions. No, the smile was cold, empty. It was as if the woman I had seen standing before me wasn't really her at all. She was a vessel. She was being used. "You're not supposed to be here." Her voice didn't sound like Beyoncé's. It was deeper, hollow, and there was something foreign in the tone. The words were slithering into my mind, wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. She didn't speak like this on stage. She didn't speak like this when she greeted fans or the crew. This voice was raw, almost animalistic, like a force beyond her control was using her vocal cords to communicate with me. I don't understand," I managed to whisper, though my throat felt like it was closing in on itself. "What are you? What's going on?" Her eyes grew darker, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her expression. Something that wasn't the entity, but it disappeared almost immediately, swallowed up by the presence inside her. "You think you understand," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "But you have no idea what's really going on here. No idea what this is. You'll never understand." The words pierced me, the weight of them sinking into my chest. I was starting to understand. At least, I was beginning to understand how deep this went, how far it reached. Beyoncé wasn't just being controlled by something. She was being completely taken over, consumed by something that had been around for centuries. This wasn't just about staying young. This was about power, total control over everything, over her body, over her image, over her life. She wasn't living her own life. She was being used, and there was nothing she could do about it. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the air around me thickened. The mirror behind her began to glow again, casting an eerie light across the room. The strange symbols on the wall flared to life, pulsing with an energy that felt alive, like the room itself was a heartbeat. Then, something shifted in the air. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The mirror was no longer just reflecting the room. It was showing something else, something that wasn't supposed to exist. The face in the mirror changed again, but this time it wasn't just a distortion. It was like the mirror had become a portal, a window into something darker, something ancient. The figure that stared back wasn't human. It was like a shadow, a wraith that had been cloaked in the guise of Beyoncé's body. The face in the reflection was twisted, contorted in a way that made my stomach churn. There were no clear features, just darkness, black eyes, sharp teeth, and a mouth that seemed to open wider as if it was trying to swallow the entire room. I tried to move, to run, but my legs were still frozen. The fear inside me was suffocating, like I was drowning in it. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was real. I wasn't imagining this. The entity in the mirror spoke. Its voice was not Beyoncé's. It was something deeper, darker, a growl that rumbled from the depths of the earth. "She's mine now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I could feel the power in those words, the weight of centuries pressing down on me. This thing had been alive for so long, moving through countless bodies, feeding off their power and influence. It had found a perfect vessel in Beyoncé, and now it was using her to keep itself alive, to stay in control. "You're too late, little one," The voice continued, low and menacing. "You can't stop what's already begun." I wanted to scream, to shout, to do anything to break the grip this thing had on me. But I couldn't. My mind was spinning. My body was numb, and I felt like I was being dragged into this world. This dark, twisted world where nothing made sense. Beyoncé's body took a step toward me. She didn't move like herself. It was like something else was walking in her skin. Something not human. The fear that washed over me was paralyzing, and for the first time, I felt completely powerless. But this wasn't just a fight for control over Beyoncé. It was a fight for control over everything. What I didn't realize was that the entity's plans were far more sinister, and I was already tangled in its web. And now, I was the one who was marked. I was drowning in fear. I had just witnessed something that shouldn't exist, something beyond the reach of anything I had ever understood. The entity inside Beyoncé, the one controlling her, wasn't just using her to stay young and powerful. It was using her for something darker. It was feeding, consuming, and I was standing on the precipice, realizing that I had become a part of it. I couldn't leave. I couldn't run. I was trapped, and I knew that the more I learned, the more dangerous it would become. The night after that terrifying encounter, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creature's face, that distorted reflection in the mirror. I saw Beyoncé's vacant expression, her body moving like it wasn't truly hers. And I knew, deep down, that the entity wasn't done with me. It had marked me, and it wasn't going to let me go. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know everything. I needed answers, no matter the cost. The next day, I started digging. I went through every corner of Beyoncé's private space, hoping to find some kind of clue, something that would help me understand what was really happening. But everything I found only made the situation worse. There were more symbols, more books, and more ritualistic objects. There were notes on life force, on energy exchanges, on how to bind a soul to a vessel. And everything pointed back to the same terrifying truth. Beyoncé wasn't just an entertainer. She was a vessel. The documents I found confirmed everything I had been suspecting. The rituals weren't just about keeping her young. They were about controlling her, keeping her bound to the entity and feeding the entity's power. There was a dark, twisted system at play, one that required constant energy to sustain the possession. It was like a twisted cycle. Beyoncé would perform. She would give her energy to the crowd, to her fans, and the entity would feed off of that energy. But it wasn't just her energy. It was the energy of anyone close to her. Anyone who came into contact with her, anyone who was exposed to the dark force, was at risk of having their own life force drained away. I had witnessed it in subtle ways. People around her seemed drained, exhausted, like they had given more than they had left to give. Some of the crew members had started to look hollow. Their eyes were empty, and they seemed to lose their will, their drive. But there was more. Something even darker. In the deepest part of the documents, I found a section labeled "The Final Ritual." The words on the page were like a curse, a dark promise that chilled me to my core. This ritual wasn't just about keeping Beyoncé alive. It was about transferring her soul to the entity, to bind them together forever. The process was meant to ensure that the entity could control everything, Beyoncé's body, her mind, her soul. And the final step in this ritual, the one that had been written about so ominously, it was about using sacrifices, offering someone's life energy to complete the bond. The ritual wasn't just a performance. It wasn't just some ancient, forgotten magic. It was real. And Beyoncé wasn't just a performer. She was a puppet, a vessel being used to keep something ancient and dangerous alive. Something that had existed for centuries, moving from host to host, using fame and power to stay in control. And now, the worst part, the entity knew I knew. I had uncovered too much, and I was becoming a liability. The feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake, became overwhelming. Every step I took, every corner I turned, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I couldn't escape it. But the worst part was this. The more I dug, the more I realized I wasn't just a bystander anymore. The entity had already marked me. I began to notice strange things happening. My reflection started to look off. My own energy began to feel drained, like I was losing pieces of myself. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was just stress or exhaustion. But deep down, I knew better. The entity had found me. It was pulling me in, and I could feel it inside me. It was like I was connected to it now, through Beyoncé, through the ritual, through whatever dark energy I had exposed myself to. I couldn't get away from it. I had been too close for too long. I started to hear voices whispering in my ear when no one was around. They weren't words I recognized, but they were commanding, like someone or something was trying to control my thoughts, to bend my will. And that's when I realized I wasn't just caught in the entity's web. I was becoming part of it. I had become an offering without even realizing it. But I wasn't the only one in danger. The ritual wasn't just about Beyoncé anymore. It was about something bigger, something far more terrifying. The entity wasn't done yet. And if I didn't stop it, I would be swallowed whole, just like the others before me. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the backstage area seemed to close in around me, the air thick with an oppressive weight I couldn't escape. I had uncovered the truth, but the truth was worse than I could have imagined. Beyoncé wasn't just a vessel. She was a prisoner of something ancient, something malevolent, and I, too, had become a part of it, connected to the entity in ways I couldn't understand. The more I tried to distance myself, the more I felt the pull. It wasn't just in my mind anymore. It was physical. I could feel it inside me. The whispers, the pressure, the constant feeling that I was being watched. I was marked, and there was no turning back. But it wasn't just about me anymore. The entity wasn't just using Beyoncé. It was feeding off everything around her. The fans, the crew, the energy from the world that adored her. And I knew, if I didn't stop it, it would only grow stronger. I had to make a choice. Fight back, or let it consume everything. It was late, just after another performance. I had stayed behind knowing I had to confront her, to confront the entity that had taken over her. I couldn't let this go on. Someone had to stop it. I walked through the dimly lit hallways, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, the pressure growing as I neared the private room where Beyoncé went after each show. The door was closed, but I knew I couldn't waste any more time. This was it. I didn't knock. I didn't wait for permission. I opened the door and stepped inside. Beyoncé was standing by the mirror again, just like I had seen her before. But this time, something was different. She wasn't alone. The room was filled with a palpable, terrifying energy. The air shimmered with that same eerie glow that I had witnessed the last time. The symbols on the wall were alive again, pulsating with a rhythmic energy, like they were breathing. For a moment, I hesitated. I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know if I could handle what I was about to face, but I had no choice. This had to end. I approached her slowly, and she didn't even turn around. She was staring at the mirror, tracing the symbols with her fingers. The air seemed to grow colder with every movement. I could feel the entity's presence before I even saw it. The suffocating weight of its power, pressing in on me, suffocating me. Then she spoke. It wasn't her voice. It was deeper, more resonant. It felt like it was coming from inside the very walls of the room. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said. The words weren't just spoken. They were commanded. The entity was speaking through her. The real Beyoncé wasn't there anymore. She had completely disappeared. "You don't know what you've just done," the voice continued, its tone dripping with malice. "You think you can stop this? You think you can break the bond? You're already too far gone." I stepped forward, my fists clenched, my mind racing. The truth was clear. This wasn't just about Beyoncé anymore. It was about control. The entity had gained too much power, and now it was using her as a vessel to spread its influence. It had been feeding off everything around her, growing stronger with each show, each sacrifice. I had to act fast. I couldn't let it take any more lives, not even my own. "You have no control over her," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "This ends now." Beyoncé's body turned toward me, but her eyes were empty. The once vibrant, powerful woman I had admired was gone. What stood before me wasn't her. It was something dark, something that had taken root inside her and wouldn't let go. The voice laughed. It was a low, menacing sound that echoed through the room. "You think you can stop me?" it taunted. "You think you can stop the inevitable? I am eternal. I am power incarnate. And you are just a fleeting thought. Nothing more." I didn't back down. I couldn't. I ran toward the mirror, desperate to destroy it, to break whatever hold this thing had over her. The moment my hands touched the surface, a surge of energy shot through me. Electric, painful, like I had stuck my fingers into a live wire. The room seemed to pulse, the symbols glowing brighter and brighter, as if the mirror itself was alive. I felt the entity trying to drag me in, trying to consume me, but I wasn't about to let that happen. I fought back with everything I had, my mind screaming, my body aching. Suddenly, I saw something shift in the mirror. It wasn't just a reflection, it was a gateway, a portal to another world, and standing at the edge of it was the thing inside Beyoncé, the entity. It was huge, dark, a mass of swirling shadows and distorted faces, and it was looking directly at me. I knew I couldn't win this fight, not alone, but I had a choice. I could let it take me, let it feed on me, or I could destroy the source of its power, the mirror. With every ounce of strength I had left, I smashed my fist into the glass. The impact was deafening. The world seemed to shatter around me as the mirror cracked, the light from within splintering into 1,000 pieces. For a moment, everything was silent. The energy in the room vanished, and the symbols on the wall stopped glowing. Beyoncé's body collapsed to the floor, and I rushed to her side. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I knew, the real Beyoncé. She looked at me, confused, like she had just woken from a deep sleep. She paused, her voice weak. What happened? But the silence didn't last. The entity wasn't gone. It was just waiting, biding its time. The battle wasn't over. The entity was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next move. And I wasn't sure if I had just broken the cycle, or if I had just set in motion something far worse than I could ever imagine.